What is up? Welcome to the DFS Academy for week 13. How about those Thanksgiving games? Andre Yoshivas, 3 touchdowns. I'm kidding. We're recording this on Wednesday. I have no idea what happened in those games, but they're looking like some great games for Thanksgiving, and that puts us in a bit of a weird spot for the week 13 main slate. Only 10 games going on, and they are not our favorite games. That doesn't mean you can't build a fun lineup. Let's get into it. Good morning and welcome to the Black Friday edition of DFS Academy. We have no discounts to offer you, so we just have to win you $1 million, right, Austin? That's the goal today. I'm Ryan. He's Austin. How you doing today, my friend?
Good. Excited to be, well, I don't know. I feel weird talking about this main slate. I was going to say excited because my brain is still, we're recording on Wednesday. My brain is still in the Thanksgiving slate, and I'm like, oh yeah, hype, ready to build some lineups today. But then the main slate comes around, and it's going to be a fascinating one this week.
So I was up early today to prep for the show. We're recording on Wednesday morning, a first for Austin and I. And I had time, Austin. I watched our Thanksgiving episode. And we were so young and naive then. We were so excited about these games because the 3 games on Thanksgiving are great. And you said this before the show. When have we ever gotten 3 just excellent games for Thanksgiving? But then it just kind of has soured us on this main slate. And I want to be very clear. While we do not enjoy the 10 games on the main slate, that doesn't mean it makes DFS any less fun. If anything, Austin, I think it makes the lineup building more interesting. And I also think after last week's cash, which we'll talk about in a moment, I think this kind of gives you a chance to come back, because last week's cash was so weird and so controlled by outliers. Whereas this week, I think things might slate in a little bit more predictably.
Yeah, I feel that. I am intrigued to see how this week will work out, but it's fun because it's also that time of year where you're just getting eliminated from your fantasy playoffs as well, but DFS is still here.
Exactly. That's normally my intro, but that'll probably be my intro next week because your season's probably over in some of your leagues, but DFS is always there for you. It was my saying for the last month of last season. Quick reminders at the top of the show, folks. You can play DFS with Austin, myself, and some other really cool people who participate in these club fantasy contests. Austin, I'm pretty sure the folks who won last week's contest, who I will remember to announce at the end of the show, their names I've never seen before. I think this is their first wins ever in the club fantasy contest. So it's great seeing new names in there. There's still plenty of room for folks to jump in there. $2 contest on FanDuel and DraftKings. You'll find links in the description of this video. And Austin, before we get started, also let them know that we have a Discord that I think is a pretty great tool for some of our DFS players out there.
Yeah, that's right. You can join our listener Discord. The link to join that is in the show description. We talk all sorts of fantasy football formats, but specifically for this, so we talk DFS. Yeah. I always drop in kind of my cash lineup for the week, which often does really well, but this week it did well, but not.
I was going to say, Austin, and I've gotten onto that trend. I want to match my co-host here, and I hope people are coming to us for advice. You and I dropped 2 banger lineups last week. Neither one cashed.
Yeah, it was a weird week for cash, but we'll drop the cash lineups in there. We'll answer questions about your lineups if you have questions about how you're building your lineup that week, and most importantly, we'll celebrate wins. And if you win big and want to celebrate it, want to get talked about on this show, drop your lineup in there. We'll celebrate your wins together.
Absolutely. We start the show off with what we call answers to the test. This show, if you've never tuned in before, welcome. Sorry, your season's over. We break down lineups between cash and GPP, and maybe we'll explain those a little bit when we get to those sections. But we start off talking about last week's Millie Maker, because that's what I'm here for, to win $1 million. We call it answers to the test. Last week's Millie Maker scored 277.04 points. That is 13 points, the highest score of the entire season. It was a weird week. Austin, I have theories about this lineup, but I will announce it first. Jameis Winston, Jahmyr Gibbs, Emmanuel Wilson, Devonta Smith, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Wan'Dale Robinson. They went with a 4 wide receiver lineup, A.J. Brown, Hunter Henry at tight end, Cleveland defense. So, Austin, this was obviously a heavy focus on the New York Giants in the Detroit game. Now, when I say a heavy focus, it was a normal heavy focus. The last 2 Millie Makers have been onslaughts. This was a skinny stack, Winston and Wan'Dale Robinson with a Jahmyr Gibbs bring back, a very traditional lineup. Very bold move going with both Philadelphia wide receivers who have struggled in recent weeks. They ate the good chalk with Wilson, which also saved them some salary. Henry against Cincinnati was a person we talked about on the show. I forgot to list all the people we talked about from this lineup, but Gibbs, Wilson, Amon-Ra, probably Wandale, certainly Henry, and the Cleveland defense was my pick to be your best defense last week. So Austin, previous 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, this was a really interesting week in general. I mean, you could tell like some of the chalk really hit this week. So Emmanuel Wilson being in there, like he was like ended up being like 60-70% rostered in cash contests, which was surprising to me, but it ended up that worked out in those tournaments as well. I think the move to go both Jahmyr Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown was also a fascinating one in this. It's not often that you want to play those two together.
Yeah. So
But it worked out for this person. I mean, I think too, like the thing about this is like playing Jameis Winston was the thing that I was never going to do.
So I had a theory on this, Austin, is that this person built a Jared Goff lineup that probably looked a lot like this. And I'm going to guess one of the Philly wide receivers wasn't in it. And then they said, well, why not build the contrarian to this lineup, which is the Jameis Winston version of this lineup? Because I think Gibbs, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Wandale Robinson with a Jared Goff, it kind of goes with that onslaught that we talked about in the previous couple of weeks. But my theory is they knocked Gibbs down to Winston and then paid up for one of the Philly wide receivers or something weird along those lines, because obviously there was a little bit of savings from Goff down to Winston. To me, this feels like their second lineup they built, and it's the one that won them $1 million.
Oh yeah, or maybe their 149th lineup they built. We don't know how much they were throwing out. But I think too, the other thing that I feel like was a really smart move and is something that I think was a good thing to be considering with some of your tournament lineups in general right now, like pretty much consistently every week, is how do you pivot off of Trey McBride and find the right tight end there? Because the thing is, Trey McBride, he's having such a great season. He's going to continue to be chalky, even though he had kind of a down week last week and is priced up this week. But last week, he only scored 16 DraftKings points, which at his salary is not what you needed. But Derrick Henry scoring 2 touchdowns at a much cheaper salary was a way to gain leverage. And so that's how this person, I think, was able to, besides playing Jameis Winston, they played a lot of chalky plays, but still were able to get different in enough spots to get there.
Yeah, there were 2 chalk tight ends, Trey McBride and Hunter Henry. You just had to guess on the right one, and this person did. And we spent the whole show last week talking about where was Cincinnati going to implode, and turns out it was tight end. As you alluded to, Austin, and as I mentioned, you and I built 2 great cash lineups. And Austin, as someone who is not as dedicated to this as you are, I was very frustrated. So I know you typically enter the $25 double up. I enter the $10 double up. I scored 187 and didn't cash, which is bonkers to me. You scored 190 something and didn't cash.
Yeah, it was a wild time. My cash lineup scored 194.88. Any week, that's crushing it. Cash line, like I'm winning every double up. Like that's what happened. Happened a couple of times earlier in the season. I hit 190 2 weeks in a row, and both weeks I just went 100% in head-to-heads and doubled up in my cash lineup. This week, I was 5 to 6 points from cashing everywhere, which was really painful because Devonta Smith was really close to the 100-yard bonus, and I had him in my lineup and almost got there with him. What's wild to me about cash loss this past week is that there were people that played Jameson Williams who, if you didn't catch this, scored 0 fantasy points last week, straight up goose egged, and still were able to cash because they played Jahmyr Gibbs, Emmanuel Wilson, Michael Wilson, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Those 4 were all well over 30% rostered. Emmanuel Wilson and Michael Wilson were both 70 and 80% rostered. Trey McBride was 75% rostered, and Jacoby Brissett was 60% rostered in that $25 double up. So it was like the chalk just hit so hard. And essentially, like what I had bet on when I made this lineup was that you didn't need Emmanuel Wilson. Yeah. I was like, I just don't, I think he might be good. He might be a fine play, but I didn't expect him to be a must have in your lineup scoring 30 points, which is why I played Travis Etienne instead, who scored 20 points like it worked, right? He did well. It's just wasn't enough, which is the ups and downs of playing DFS. But I feel fairly good about the process last week, given that my cash lineup scored 194 points.
I mean, literally, my story is the same as yours, Austin. Instead of ETN, it was Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry had a good game.
Yeah.
Emmanuel Wilson had a better game, and that was the difference between cash and not cash, not to mention what I could have possibly done with the savings from falling to Henry to Emmanuel Wilson. It probably puts me easily into the cash. It was just one of those weird weeks. So what I want to end this with before we move into the week 13 slate is, if last week was your first time playing DFS and you did great, be careful. Don't go in betting way more money this week. Last week was a weird week. And if it was your first time and you did terribly, don't give up. You did probably put together a very nice lineup. As long as you included Jahmyr Gibbs, it was a weird week. Like I just want to be very clear. It's never as good or as bad as it was in week 12. It was a very strange week. So
yeah, that's a really good takeaway. I mean, there are plenty of times where I'm scoring 150, 160 points in my cash contest, and I'm doubling up. So it was one of those weeks where you needed to be on the chalk, and if you weren't, you lost out.
Precisely. All right. That wraps up our week 12 discussion. As we move into week 13, we always start the show off with cash plays. This is where you are building your bankroll. Austin, we're going to start with top of the class, but I'm going to ask you, because we may see some new listeners, just elevator pitch, cash versus GPP, what we're looking to do here. Top of the class, folks, is where you're going to be spending the most amount of money for one or possibly two players in your roster.
Yeah, and when we're playing these cash contests, we're looking to beat half the field is the principle behind it. You can play those tournaments where you have to beat most of the field to really earn a lot of money. But the great thing about cash contest is if you're in those 50-50s, those double ups and those head-to-heads, you can double your cash by beating half of the field approximately. And so it's a really good way to build bankroll and have a sustainable DFS portfolio across the course of a year. At my highest priced player this week, it is only Trey McBride. And the funny thing is, I'm kind of cheating in this category because it's supposed to be guys that are priced 8K or above. Trey McBride is only $7,800 on DraftKings. But the thing is, the guys that are priced even higher than that, I feel like you don't need them this week. They either have tough matchups like Jackson Smith and Jigba going up against the Vikings secondary. It's a tough matchup, but I think he'll be fine. But it's tougher than what we're seeing with McBride and the volume he's getting. It's also kind of like position specific, where there's no other tight end that I feel like you can reliably count on to perform as well as Trey McBride right now. This is what we used to do with Travis Kelce back in like the pre-2023 times, where it was just like you play him every week. It doesn't matter. You know he's going to get there. That's kind of where we're at with McBride right now. And the rest of the tight end position is there are so many landmines along the way that I feel like you almost have to play McBride. And you can find cheaper receiver or running back options that are consistent enough that it's okay to not pay up for the running backs and receivers in this week's main slate.
Yeah, and just to reiterate what Austin said, because we literally just said you need to find ways to pivot off of McBride. That's in tournaments. That's when you're trying to make $1 million. You have to be a little different. In cash, you don't care if everybody starts McBride because you're all getting the same amount of points at tight end. What I will say, Austin, just to talk about something we've been talking about with McBride for 3 weeks now, is they are finally catching up to his pricing, where I think they are making 2 tight end sets less and less viable. He is now being priced as a good wide receiver, and that's how we've been telling folks to treat him. It was a lot different when he was a good wide receiver at 7K. As we're approaching 8K, I think you're not running as many 2 tight end sets with Trey McBride at this point.
Yeah, I think that's fairly accurate. Like I'm less and less inclined to play those 2 tight end builds. I wasn't really doing it before.
Yeah,
anyways.
We've never been a proponent of that to begin with, but it has been viable.
It has been viable, and it's something that I think is becoming less and less viable, especially because there's not a lot of other good tight ends that you can just count on. And so yeah, there's some other tight ends I'll talk about during the cash portion just to give some variety, but I really think it's play Trey McBride and don't think about it this week.
Yeah, I think that's fair. If you're playing McBride and a $4,000 tight end, now you have $11,000 into your tight end and your flex. Well, that's like you can do other things with that. Like you don't need to necessarily build that way. So as we move on, Austin, we go to the mid-tier players, 6 to 8,000. We call them the band nerds. Too much time on their instruments, not ready for top of the class yet. You got 3 players here for us. Not that I don't like the other 2, but one I absolutely love this week.
Yeah. So the first 2 are the running backs that I have this week. So Travis Etienne at 6,500 on DraftKings and Kyron Williams at 6,600. It's the matchup is really good for both of these guys, and they've been continuing to get consistent volume. Again, I mentioned like I don't feel the need to pay up for the expensive running backs this week. I feel pretty confident with saving a little bit, but also there's not a ton of punt options available. There is one that we'll talk about in a minute, but the Rams are going up against the Panthers. The Panthers have kind of faltered and gone back to their defensive run stopping approach of last season, which is not stopping the run very well. Since week 8, they've allowed over 31 points per game to the running back position. The Rams have a 27-point implied total. They are 10-point favorites in this, so it sets up like a really good spot for Kyron Williams. And then ETN is just he's had really consistent volume. It doesn't on paper. It's not a good matchup for him, given how the Tennessee Titans have defended the run over the past 4 weeks. They've actually been the best defense against running backs since week 9. However, I do think that is a little bit I think that's more about who they have played over that span than anything that they have necessarily changed in their scheme. They played the Houston Texans in week 11, who haven't really had a solid running game this year. They played the Chargers in week 9. Again, like not like a great running game. And then they played the Seattle Seahawks last week, who they have a decent running game, but they haven't, the Seahawks haven't like relied on the run game the way that I think that the Jaguars will make sure to rely on Travis Etienne.
Yeah. Kyron Williams is my favorite from this slate just because we know Carolina can get beat up by running backs, and he's still just the bell cow there. They don't get Blake Corum involved, and I'm going to talk more about him when we get to the GPP section because I think he may be the highest upside running back on the slate. You also have a very safe wide receiver, arguably, not even arguably, his team's only wide receiver. So.
Yeah, honestly, though, Chris Olave, he's still just $6,400 on DraftKings. They just refuse to price him up appropriately to where he needs to be. I think it was another 13 targets for him last week. Annoyingly, I had him in that cash contest, and he was another person that if he just got a little bit more done, it would have been there. I also think that the New Orleans Saints Miami Dolphins matchup is a little bit sneaky in terms of fantasy production. I don't know that I expect a ton of touchdowns to be scored in this game, but I could see these 2 teams kind of going back and forth a little bit. Especially because I don't have a lot of trust in the defenses, and so Olave is going to be someone that Tyler Shuck is continuing to look at in that offense.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting note about New Orleans, Miami, because they both struggle with what the other team is good at. We're going to talk about Jawan Johnson later. I don't think Devon Achane actually makes the show sheet, but New Orleans isn't slowing him down. Like there's a lot of interesting points to this matchup where each defense struggles against the other team's strength, which is always a good thing for DFS.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad you called out Devon Achane there as well, because I think he's an interesting cash play as well this week, especially given his pass game usage and it being so consistent.
Yeah, he feels just super, super safe. He's Jahmyr Gibbs light, essentially. So,
yeah, good call.
Yep. We move on to the bookworms. We are talking about the value plays, $4,000 to $6,000. I always let folks know if you're playing with us on DraftKings, these prices are typically in regards to DraftKings. We talk about both. It's just easier to reference DraftKings. It's full PPR. It just makes more sense. It used to be the only one with bonuses, but it's not quite that. These are your underestimated players. And Austin, this is where the bulk of your lineup is going to be built for the most part.
Yeah, and the part of that is because I am trying to pay up for Trey McBride, and so I'm going to need to save salary elsewhere. So we'll start with the only quarterback I'm interested in this week is actually Jacoby Brissett again. There's not much explanation of why. Like if you look at his game logs, first off, he scored 20 or more fantasy points in basically every start this season. I think,
and the one he missed was by like 2 points.
So. Yeah. There you go. So he has just been the definition of consistent because they've consistently been in negative game scripts and throwing the ball a ton. I do think like eventually Jacoby Brissett's not going to get there, or eventually they're going to price him up enough that I'm like, okay, now I don't value it as much. But there's not another quarterback to pivot to that I feel like I need to have over Brissett.
Yeah.
And Tampa Bay has been giving it up to quarterbacks recently.
Awful.
They have been averaging nearly 30 points to the position since per game since week 9. And so it's just like sets up as a really smash spot. So I'm going back to Brissett. I expect him to be the chalk captain in cash contest, and I'm not thinking twice about it.
Yeah, much like McBride, it's just put him in and know that 50%, 60% of the people in your lineup are also playing him.
Yeah, which means we have to really focus on how we build our lineup around him. And one player that comes up in that conversation for the running back position is Devin Neal.
Yeah.
The New Orleans Saints backup running back who I can't remember. I think he was drafted last year. And so has been with them for, I think this is his second season. People were like really interested. Oh, Devin Neal. And he's 5K on DraftKings. Now, of course, this is only if Alvin Kamara does not play. If Kamara does play, then I think I feel a little bit nervous where I'm like, okay, maybe I just avoid this and don't worry about it. But if Kamara's out, I'm playing Devin Neal. Like he was getting used really heavily, essentially working as a 3-down back, except for when the New Orleans Saints thinks it's cute to bring in Taysom Hill. And when he was on the field, he was being used in both the run and the pass game. So I like the way he was utilized in that 5K. Like if he's the starting running back on Sunday, he's going to get played a lot. I think it's going to be like a similar situation as Emmanuel Wilson last week. And you're going to want to have him in your lineup and take that free square.
I'm just going to interrupt real quick because this is how long the season's been. Neal is a rookie this year. I got confused there for a second. But you think about how long we were in the draft process and everything like that. It's just been a long season. He just hasn't played a lot this year, but you have Kendry Miller on IR now. You have Alvin Kamara about to be hurt. The team did add Audric Estime, which I think plays well in Neal's favor. For sharps, I think they may try to pivot to Estime, who is going to be a league min. And I don't think it's the right call in this one. I think it's Neal or it's Taysom Hill, but Taysom Hill will not be sniffing my lineup. So
yeah, no, exactly. And I think Hill won't get the volume to get there. He might be like Taysom Hill is like a tournament play, but he's not touching my lineup for cash.
Precisely.
So I have 3 receivers in this spot, and it's really just like kind of like some old reliables. Well, 2 of them are old reliables. So first off, Michael Pittman and Jacoby Myers at $5,800 and $5,700. They're both just kind of volume hogs. They're going to continue to get there. I particularly like Myers if Brian Thomas Jr. sits again. But even if Thomas is starting, I sort of think that Myers has fit out a role. And what I imagine will happen is that we will see Brian Thomas go back to his original role in this offense and not be put in the spot where he's trying to catch a ton of balls over the middle of the field, which is what Jacoby Myers is really good at. So I think Myers will maintain his role regardless. And then Michael Pittman, it is a little bit of a meh matchup for him this week, going up against the Minnesota Vikings. But overall, against the Houston Texans. But overall, I think the volume will be there enough that I'm not too worried about it. And it's just one of those deals where I'm going with guys that I know are consistently getting targeted, especially because it's really hard to pay up for the expensive receivers this week when you also are trying to pay up for Trey McBride.
Yep. And I'm just going to let you move right along because this is not the Arizona receiver that I think everyone's going to be going after.
Well, so there's some salary consideration this week
That's
that
true.
I think becomes really challenging with the conversation between Michael Wilson and Greg Dortch. So the play in cash the past 2 weeks has been double stack Jacoby Brissett with Michael Wilson and Trey McBride. It's gotten expensive to do that. Trey McBride at $7,800 now. Michael Wilson's up to $5,800 now. It's getting tougher and tougher to go that direction. But Greg Dortch is $4,600 on DraftKings, and he's also been getting really good volume. Like he's gone overlooked because of how dominant Michael Wilson has been. But I'm intrigued by. I think Dortch is a good way to save salary in those cash contests. What I will say is, Marvin Harrison Jr. has not been ruled out yet. And I think he is projecting towards being out, but there is a world where he plays this week. And if he does play this week, I'm not playing Greg Dortch. I will figure it out elsewhere.
Got my question because I'm like, I don't hate Greg Dortch because what is very interesting about the Arizona wide receiving core is all three of them are very different players. Michael Wilson has essentially taken over what Christian Kirk was for this offense. Like, it's not even the same offense. But you can't tell me that Arizona Cardinals fans aren't looking at Michael Wilson and seeing Christian Kirk. It just feels like that's what he is. And that puts Marvin Harrison in that very much DeAndre Hopkins role. Like, everything is lining up the way it should. Greg Dortch is the speed role in this offense. In cash, if Harrison's in, you can't gamble on that. In GPP, I think Dortch is still interesting, even if Harrison's in. I think Wilson's still interesting. More on that later. Even if Harrison's back. But in cash, I agree with you wholeheartedly. If Harrison's back, I just don't know that there's enough to rely on Greg Dortch in cash.
Yeah, no, I totally am with that. And if Harrison plays, like, he kind of becomes a cash consideration for me too, because I think that he gets volume and we see Michael Wilson's role take a step back, and he's at $6K on DraftKings. So for only $200 more, I'd almost rather play Marvin Harrison over Wilson at that point.
There you go. And wrapping it up with, I think, our second tight end we've mentioned.
Yeah, so the other tight end that I'm willing to consider in cash this week is Juwan Johnson, because the matchup is really good, and he has been getting targeted a lot from Tyler Shuck. So the New Orleans Saints go up against the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins have allowed the third most points to the tight end position since week 9, so it's setting up as a good matchup down the stretch. And it's a cheap enough salary that, of course, like, he doesn't have to do much to get there. There's not a lot of other tight ends I'm interested in this week for a cash perspective either. So I'm likely not going this direction. But if you decide you need to play Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, Jackson Smith and Jigba, or Puka Nacua, then I think you almost have to play a Juwan Johnson at tight end to make it happen.
Yeah, more on that later, because that's what I kind of went with our lineup for the show today. But I agree wholeheartedly. I did not love the tight ends. There were two that I loved, and it's McBride and it's Juwan Johnson. I don't know that my cash is going to be two tight end. It probably won't be. I haven't built my actual cash or tourney lineup yet, but it's interesting because Juwan Johnson, and I'll talk more about this later, has a primo matchup, but he's doing something I like. And that is, he's coming off kind of a mediocre performance where I think people may avoid him. So
yeah, no, that's a good call.
And we wrap it up with the punt plays, my favorite category. C's get degrees. And Austin, you happen to have one of my favorite players, a name I was so happy to see on your show sheet, someone I planned on having in a lot of lineups this week. So
yeah, I was so surprised to see this pop up. So last week, it's the point of the season where I have some leagues where it's late. I have a lot of injuries. I don't have a lot of time on my hands. So will go and I'll pick up players randomly at times because I'll need bodies, essentially. Yeah. Like, I need people to start. And I picked up John Mechie last week. Yeah, and my, oh my, it worked out.
It did.
I picked him up assuming I'm going to get 0 points, but at least I put in a lineup that had projected points. Nope, John Mechie, he scored points and he got targets. He's $3,800 on DraftKings. I'm coming off of 7 targets. This is your tight end play of the week, essentially. Like, yeah, if you are like, I want to play Trey McBride as my tight end and pretend he's
Trey McBride, John Mechie need to be linked to one another.
Yeah, exactly. So I think Mechie is in a good spot. It's also going up against the Atlanta Falcons, who we have seen not do well against opposing pass games or opposing teams in general. And I think Mechie, like, if he just gets, again, similar volume, he doesn't need to do much to get there. It could be a easy way to save salary and cash.
Yeah. John Mechie was Jameson Williams basically at the same time as Jameson Williams, but that is what he is. He is a burner wide receiver. He plays a small slot. Atlanta struggles against the small slot. Demario Douglas killed them a few weeks ago. Yes. John Mechie has scored a touchdown in each of the last 2 games. With Garrett Wilson out, the Jets are auditioning, and it is Adonai Mitchell and John Mechie, and Mechie is performing right now. I think he's such a great sneaky play this week.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with that. At defense for this week, I'm going back to the Tennessee Titans because they are $2,200 on DraftKings. They are $3K on FanDuel. It's funny. They are the cheapest defense on FanDuel. They're somehow not miraculously on DraftKings because the Carolina Panthers are just a little bit cheaper. But the Titans are going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And my, Trevor Lawrence, he does something goofy usually once or twice a game. And like while I will be interested in Jacksonville for tournaments, I think that you can play the Tennessee Titans defense in cash, especially given how much salary savings they'll give you.
Well, Lawrence was good last week, but he had, as you mentioned, a very goofy pick six to a defensive lineman. It was one of my favorite plays of week 12. Ball got knocked up in the air. Walter Nolan, huge guy, has to be 320, reaches out with one hand and then walks it into the end zone, Austin. That's the kind of things that happen against this defense. And Tennessee has the players. They have a really good young linebacker there that can make some crazy plays like that. So
yeah, so just going as cheap as I can in cash while feeling comfortable with it, and betting against the Jaguars always you know that there's a chance there.
Ain't that the truth? All right, as we wrap up the cash plays, move on to GPP. I will remind you, you can play with us. Links in the description of this video. Contest on both FanDuel and DraftKings. We do this section a little bit different. I get a little bit more involved. We go position by position, our favorite GPP plays of the week. Austin is going to give you a ton of options because this is what he does. I'm going to give you my kind of one weird option, though they don't feel very weird this week, but I will be able to explain why I like them. So, Austin, get us started with the quarterbacks that we like in GPP.
Yeah, so I have 3 different picks that I brought to the table this week because we'll talk about this through this section. It's a really weird week for the main slate. The 3 best game environments for the week overall all happen on Thursday. And funny enough, I think the next best game environment after that happens on is it Monday night? No, it's the Buffalo Pittsburgh Steelers game is the 4th best environment on the weekend. They're at 47.5 points. But then you get at 46.5 points the Patriots versus the Giants, which is on Monday night. And basically every other game on the main slate is at 44.5 points over, under, or below. So it's a weird week. There's not a lot of like high-end options for you to be like, oh, wow, there are 3 games that are going to score 50 points or more. No, that's on Thursday. So I was trying to think differently about like which of these lineups do I think are probably going to, or these contests are likely to hit their over, or who do I think is just in a good spot? And I came up with 3 options. The first is Justin Herbert at $6,500 on DraftKings. I think going up against the Las Vegas Raiders, my cat is really mad right now.
Yeah, so we have a fan today.
Yeah, he would like to be let out of this room. He's in a really good spot going up against the Las Vegas Raiders. I feel like this is like one of those AFC West matchups where like it seems like it could be gross, but I could see Geno Smith like turning back the clock and all of a sudden you have a bit of a back and forth matchup. Yeah. Also, I think that the Chargers are just going to kind of struggle to run the ball unless Marion Hampton comes back. So that's like that kind of like maybe changes the script a little bit, but I think Herbert will be in a good spot and they'll need him to win this game. The other 2 guys I like in the spot, Trevor Lawrence on the other side of that Tennessee matchup that we were just talking about. I'm intrigued because he hasn't had a true pop week, and the Tennessee Titans defense, while they can also score a defensive touchdown, they can also be had. And I feel like this is a place where we could see, I wonder, do we see Trevor Lawrence finally pop off for a week? And maybe this gets to be a back and forth matchup, which brings me to Cam Ward.
Yeah.
Who's really cheap. He's been playing the position well, like from a quarterbacking perspective. I think there's a lot to like there. And he's been running the ball more over the past couple of weeks. The past 2 weeks, he has 30 or more rushing yards. And last week he had a rushing touchdown at 4.6K on DraftKings. He doesn't have to do much to get you there. And so I really like having a go. Having a go with Cam Ward this week just because of the savings, and people are going to overlook him. But that, I mean, again, we've seen weird things happen with divisional contests. Him going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars, I think it could be a good time to target Ward.
Yeah, I told you when you got to the show sheet before me, I told you I looked at your quarterbacks and there were 4 quarterbacks that stood out to me this week. Jacoby Brissett is certainly one of them. You didn't mention him in this section. You mentioned him in the previous section. Jacoby Brissett, even in GPP, I feel like is going to be kind of chalky because of the fact that Tampa Bay is bad against quarterbacks and wide receivers. Justin Herbert coming off the worst game of his career out of a bye week. Love him this week. Trevor Lawrence, I moved away from him for the exact same reason you mentioned. He hasn't had the pop game yet, so I don't know if I can trust him. But there is a human being who has had the pop game, Austin, and that is Josh Allen. And so with me this week, I'm like, keep it simple, stupid. Like, Josh Allen has shown 6 touchdown upside. And do you know what the Pittsburgh Steelers allowed last week? 3 passing touchdowns to Caleb Williams. The Steelers are not the defense you think they are. They did shut down Joe Flacco, but I think that was a Joe Flacco issue. Justin Herbert, 220 and 1 touchdown. But then you get into Daniel Jones, 340 and a touchdown. Jordan Love, 360 and 3 touchdowns. The game before that, Joe Flacco, 340 and 3 touchdowns. They've allowed multiple touchdowns in, I think, 8 games this season. The Steelers can be beaten, and if anyone's going to beat them, it's Josh Allen. Oh, and by the way, his team just gave up a game that they should not have last week, and they have a lot to prove this week. I think Josh Allen comes out of this one hungry. I don't say he's going to score 6 touchdowns, but what I will say is on this slate, Austin, he is the only quarterback with 5 and 6 touchdown upside. And so for GPP, that's where I'm going with this one.
Yeah, no, I love playing Josh Allen this week. I definitely don't mind going that direction. And the other thing with Allen is we rarely see him have 2 dud games in a row. So last week he had a 10-point game. So usually we see him bounce back. And if he ends up scoring 25, 30 points, like with the way the slate is, like and how depressed the over underlines are, there is a chance that a lot of these games totally dud. And if Josh Allen scores even 25 points, that could be all you need from your quarterback. And it just mattered that you had more on pure points. But as you mentioned, he has the upside to get to 40 points. And in a situation where they're going to need him to keep this train on the tracks, I really like going towards him.
Yeah. Of the quarterbacks I liked, Austin, the only 2 that I can look at and be like, what could go wrong? And I don't have a good answer are Josh Allen and Jacoby Brissett. Like those are the 2 where like, I just don't see what goes wrong with those 2. So if I were ever going to build 2 Millie Maker lineups, it would be this week, one with Allen, one with Jacoby Brissett. They feel like the right call. I'm not going to do that because I don't chase losses, but this would be the week to do it. Plus, unless I win $1 million on Thanksgiving, and then I'll have a ton of lineups because that's who I am. Austin, let's move on to the running backs again. You got 4 for us here.
Yeah, so moving over to the running back position, I mean, I have a lot of guys here that I liked as well. I first off wanted to talk about Ashton Genty, who's $6,400 on DraftKings. He's on the other side of the Chargers game, so this is a little bit correlating and attacking that Chargers Raiders matchup that I mentioned earlier. It's not really that great of a matchup, but he's been getting the utilization. And the Chargers, what we have seen this season is they can be beat on the ground. And part of the reason that it looks like not a good matchup over the past 4 weeks is because of who the Chargers have played more than anything. And I think that if we see a situation where the Raiders are able to establish the run, it actually sets up really well for the Justin Herbert side as well. We see maybe the Raiders get ahead with behind Genty. Maybe Genty scores a couple of touchdowns, and then Justin Herbert's having to sling it over and over again to get caught up in this game. So it's really building around that game. It's like obvious to say I'm interested in Jonathan Taylor this week, but I wanted to talk about this because
you better have some money.
He is $9,800 on DraftKings, no longer 10K. They decided 10K was too much. I don't really understand why they decided that, but here we are. He's now only $9,800. He's going up against the Houston Texans defense, which I think most people think is a good defense, and you don't want to attack matchups against them. And I understand the thinking there, but I also feel like this could be a situation where it doesn't matter, and Jonathan Taylor gets there anyways. First off, we just saw the Buffalo Bills rush for 143 yards against the Houston Texans. Now, of course, a decent amount of that is going to be Josh Allen. But this is Jonathan Taylor we're talking about here. Like, I feel like going into the Atlanta Falcons game 2 weeks ago, I was thinking, oh yeah, this is a good week to fade Jonathan Taylor just in the showdown slate to try and get leverage. And then he popped off for like 50 plus fantasy points. So I think people are just not going to want to play him because of the salary, and that makes him all the more reason why I want to try and make a way to play him.
Yeah, I have nothing to add. It's never a bad bet betting on Jonathan Taylor. So,
yeah. And speaking of him destroying the Falcons, Breece Hall gets the Falcons this week. Breece Hall is only 6K on DraftKings. He might actually be cash viable this week. The more I have thought about this, but I do think that he has a chance to kind of pop off against the Atlanta Falcons just because like their run defense has not been great. Now, I will say they came back a little bit last week and were able to defend the run a little bit better against the New Orleans Saints. But it was the New Orleans Saints having Alvin Kamara go out early due to injury, and it's the Saints. Like, they're not a good team.
Yeah.
So I feel, which the Jets aren't either, but I feel like more confident in their running game, especially because you have more of a run threat at quarterback that can help kind of offset some of the ability to defend the run and just play run first.
Yeah, I caught some highlights of the Jets game last week, and there was a really nice play where Breece Hall made a spin move right at the line of scrimmage and ended up taking a pass for like 17 yards. And it's just like Breece Hall is playing hero ball right now, and Breece Hall playing hero ball is usually high upside play.
Yeah, and he's also, I mean, he is that big play threat. So it's you're getting a different type of player than you are in a Devin Neal, who I think Devin Neal is kind of more of a solid 3 down. Like, I'm going to get you 4 or 5 yards every time. I'm going to get there on volume and then maybe fall into the end zone. Breece Hall, he's a big play seeker. And so that plays really well against the Falcons, who they can be had on defense for sure.
Absolutely.
And then my last running back that I am interested in this week, and this is bringing it back if you played on the Josh Allen side in that Buffalo Pittsburgh game, is Jaylen Warren, because the Bills have been rough against opposing running backs. Jaylen Warren gets involved in the run game, although he didn't last week. And so Warren is coming off of a down week. So I think he could go overlooked in terms of rostership percentage because of that. But I think the matchup is there that he's a good consideration for tourneys this week.
Yeah, and I think there's this perspective that Kenneth Gainwell has usurped that role. He hasn't. He's taken the entire passing role, which makes him interesting as well. Jaylen Warren is still the runner here, and Aaron Rodgers coming back, that's only going to play in Jaylen Warren's favor, where Rodgers is more likely to call audibles at the line and when he sees something and just get the ball into Jaylen Warren's hands. So
yeah, well, and the Kenny Gainwell side of this, I feel like part of that was because Warren was coming off of injury and they needed a game where they were activating more both of their running backs. But I agree, it's still Jaylen Warren's backfield.
Yep. For me, I'm looking at touchdown upside, obviously, with this being GPP. And I've said for years, and this year it's changed a bit, but there's not too many running backs with Kieran Williams touchdown upside. And now you get him against the Carolina Panthers. And it's been a while, but the Carolina Panthers are all of a sudden bleeding points to the running back again. They've played pretty good defense this season. But over their last 3 games, they're giving up the 4th most points to running backs, and they've played Kieran Williams level running backs. And actually, I can go back before that, go all the way back to week 8, and they're probably giving up the most points. I didn't include week 8 in my things, but I'm guessing they're the most because week 8 was James Cook going for 216 and 2 against them. On top of James Cook, Josh Jacobs goes 87 and 1. Very next game, Alvin Kamara goes 83 yards plus 3 catches, doesn't find the end zone. Very next game, Bijan Robinson 104 and 2, and then you get Christian McCaffrey 89 and 1. Not to mention Christian McCaffrey's receiving upside. Kieran Williams is not going to catch the ball, but we've seen running backs get after this team without catching the ball. The biggest worry here, Austin, is always the worry with the Los Angeles Rams, and that's that Devontae Adams just steals all of the touchdowns. I feel like things swing. Everything regresses to the mean. I feel like this is going to be the game where we finally see Kieran Williams with that 2 touchdown upside.
Yeah, I really like Kieran Williams this week. And I think, it's one of those deals that even if Devontae Adams scores a goal line touchdown or 2, like Kieran Williams can get there as well. If this team, if they score, let's say 28 points, score 3 or 4 touchdowns, like you could see Devontae Adams having one of those, 1 or 2 of those, and Kyron Williams having 1 or 2 of those. So actually playing those 2 together in the lineup, I think is a really interesting way to build.
One thing I'm going to do after we get off this show, because we're late enough that I'm going to remember, I have been debating for 18 months now whether it is Kieran or Kyron. I have always been Kyron, but Josh has got me into Kieran, and I'm going to find out the pronunciation of this young man's name. He's one of my favorite players. Don't know how to pronounce his first name. Let's move on to the wide receivers, Austin, and I stole one of yours, so you got 4 of them for us again.
Yeah, I've got several options for the receiver position. I mean, a lot of this is going to be also like, how do you stack with these with the quarterbacks that we mentioned earlier in the show. But first off, like for Justin Herbert, I'm looking at Keenan Allen. We've seen him continue to get consistent volume, but we haven't seen a true pop week. And again, I don't trust the Chargers to run the ball well, and so I think they're going to have to pass the ball, which lends itself to Keenan Allen performing well. We've seen a dip from Quentin Johnston. Aronde Gadsden, he's been getting good volume, but it's a tough matchup. Vegas Raiders have been really good against opposing tight ends, and we haven't seen like a ton of pop from Ladd McConkey. I just feel like Keenan Allen is like the surest thing here and has the best chance for the upside there.
Couldn't have said it better myself. I think Keenan Allen is the sure thing, and that matters in this instance. So.
Yeah, exactly. For if you're playing Trevor Lawrence teams, I'm very fascinated by playing Brian Thomas Jr. this week. Now, of course, if he doesn't play, I'm pivoting to Jacoby Myers, and I think Myers is a great pivot. But I'm very fascinated because I think people are going to say like, "Oh, Brian Thomas Jr. He's done for. He's coming off of injury. They brought in Myers because Brian Thomas couldn't get it done." And I feel like that they brought in Myers so that they could let Thomas be the player that he's meant to be. He's meant to be an outside the numbers, downfield hoss, and that's what he did last year. That was what he was so good at.
That's why we loved him.
It's why we loved him, and I want to see him get back to that this week. And so I think it's the situation where like I kind of want to be a week too early than a week too late on this call, and I think we'll see the Brian Thomas that we saw towards the end of last year show up here down the stretch.
Yeah, I think that's such a great way of looking at it, is being a week too early instead of a week too late, because I agree with you wholeheartedly. I've been defending this kid all season long that there's no way he's this bad. It's growing pains in a new offense. It's not having the right complementary pieces. I think Jacoby Myers is the right complementary piece, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. If there's going to be a Brian Thomas pop week, it feels like this could be it. So.
Yeah. A weird pick that I did not expect to ever be talking about on the show this year, but I'm intrigued by Darnell Mooney this week. And some of this has to do with like the salary considerations at this for this slate and this tier of the receiver position this week. There's not a lot of like mid-level options that I feel have true upside this week. Darnell Mooney, however, is one of those options. It is correlating with the Breece Hall play from earlier. And also, it occurred to me watching the Falcons last week, which as a Falcons fan, I was
tough to do.
I was expecting them to lose. I was just like, I was hate watching it, I guess. And then Kirk Cousins like turns back the clock like 12 months, and it's like,
look viable.
You can throw the ball again. And he threw the ball to Darnell Mooney. And it occurred to me, I think the reason Mooney was good last year is because we got like 12 weeks of Kirk Cousins. And once Michael Penix came in, Penix doesn't want to throw the ball to Darnell Mooney. He doesn't want to push the ball downfield the way that Kirk Cousins will. He wants to find his big receivers who can box up guys and go and make him right, because I do think Penix is a little bit inaccurate at times, and that's okay when you're throwing to Drake London and Kyle Pitts because they have such huge wingspans. They can go up and high point the ball. But Darnell Mooney, he's not your guy if you don't feel like you're super confident putting it on a pin.
Got to hit a spot on the field with Darnell Mooney.
So. And Kirk Cousins can hit a spot on the field, so I like going towards him this week.
Is Mooney contingent on London being out, or are you good with I see you shaking your head?
No, I think it's even better if London is in, because then Mooney will get some better looks, because they're still gonna try and get the ball to London. But we saw London, he popped as soon as Penix came on into the table last week. And Mooney was doing well with both he and London on the field. So I love it even more if London is playing.
Yeah, it's not like the Jets have corners that you have to worry about. So
not anymore. They just have draft picks.
Yeah, bad defense. And you bring us home with Jalen Waddle.
Yeah, so I was trying to think of ways to come at this Miami Dolphins New Orleans Saints game, because it's another situation where I don't necessarily think we're going to get a ton of scoring in this game from a football perspective. Like I could see this game finishing like 21-17, but it feels like the type of situation where there's going to be a lot of play volume. There's going to be a lot of plays run in the game because the way that both of these offense approach their schemes. And I wanted to find a way to get access to that game. So Jalen Waddle is the one that kind of stuck out to me. Now I think that you can save with Malik Washington, and there's some upside potential there, or go Devon Achane on the Miami side and just call it a day. But I like the idea of going to Jalen Waddle, because it's one of the situations too. Like we haven't seen a true pop week from Waddle in a minute, where he's scoring like 30 plus points, and we know he has that upside. And they're coming out of the bye week against a really bad Saints team. I think that this could be an interesting spot for Miami to come out, kind of bounce back a little bit, and Waddle will likely be the beneficiary of that.
Nope, I think that's a great call. Waddle has just been playing so well as of late. The guy I'm going with has also been playing so well as of late. And Austin, you kind of already did this for me. So I applaud you for this. I think there are going to be a lot of people finding reasons not to play Michael Wilson this week. And I think that plays to our favor in GPP because we pointed out Tampa Bay is awful against the wide receiver as of late. I mean, they were awful on defense as of late. Devontae Adams, 2 touchdowns against them. Puka Nacua did Puka Nacua things. We know who Tyrell Shavers is because of what he did against, so I'm losing my mind here, Tampa Bay. Gabe Davis was relevant in that game. Mac Hollins was relevant against Tampa Bay. Stephon Diggs, Kyle Williams had a 72-yard touchdown. This is a team that gives up big plays, Austin. Plays well into Greg Dortch, plays well into Marvin Harrison, but it also means Jacoby Brissett, you're not just going to forget Michael Wilson after these last 2 weeks. Plain and simple. We are talking 33 targets, 25 catches in 2 weeks. Oh, and he hasn't found the end zone yet. If you believe in regression to the mean, I think a Michael Wilson touchdown is probably on the table this week against the defense that just gives up a ton of scoring. And again, if Marvin Harrison is back, people are going to, first of all, Marvin Harrison is cheaper on FanDuel, if I remember correctly. Immediately, people are going to be like, well, I have to go Marvin Harrison. He's $100 cheaper. Great. Please do that. Greg Dortch is a reason for big plays. I still think there's a home for Michael Wilson, even with Marvin Harrison back. And again, this might be the week where people are like, something's going to eventually fall. I don't think it's Michael Wilson, though. So.
Yeah, I like that. And honestly, I think that that's the way to attack this from a game stacking perspective. I think there's intrigue to me in playing the Baker Mayfield side of this because
and have Wilson as your bring back.
Exactly, because I feel like people are going to be down on Tampa Bay. They've kind of struggled a little bit. They haven't hit their ceiling, but Tampa Bay, they've got stuff to play for. Like they are playing for the division title at this point because the Panthers have kept it competitive, and we know that the Arizona Cardinals can give up points, and people are going to assume that the Cardinals side are going to pass a ton and get the volume there, which is true. They probably will, because it is a better matchup for them, but it's going to be really easy to gain leverage on Jacoby Brissett by just playing Baker Mayfield and saying that they get there. And so you could do Mayfield, Emeka Egbuka, bring it back with Michael Wilson, and you're going to have you're going to get access to a game. Lineup. Yeah, it's going to be different, but I think it's going to be access to a game environment that I think will be good for fantasy points.
And we just saw this a few weeks ago. And let me start by addressing the Baker Mayfield injury. It came out that it was an injury to his left elbow. Baker Mayfield, if there is any baller quarterback in the NFL, it's Baker Mayfield. A left elbow injury is not keeping him out of this game. The team would need to keep him out, and I don't think they're keeping him out for Teddy Bridgewater. So I love that call first and foremost. But we saw this exact environment where everybody wanted to be on the Drake May side of the New England Tampa Bay game, and Baker Mayfield was the better play. This is screaming that exact same game environment. And like you said, Tampa Bay has a lot to play for right now. Baker Mayfield's a baller. He's going to be on the field. All you have to hope is that there's no weird re-aggravation that it's a pain management and has to take him out of the game. But when you're in GPP, that's the kind of shit you bet on. Like, I need 35 points out of a quarterback that nobody else is playing. That's kind of Baker Mayfield this week. So
yeah, there you go.
I love that Michael Wilson, we spent so much time talking about him, just leads to Baker Mayfield praise. But no, I love that way of playing that game environment. As we move on to tight ends, Austin, I'll just quickly throw out there. Mine is Juwan Johnson because, again, much like running back, I'm looking for touchdown upside. Miami over the last 3 weeks, four games rather, gives up the most touchdowns to tight ends. That's why I'm going with Juwan Johnson. You already mentioned him earlier in the show. You went with a player that I'm very intrigued by, but you also went with his teammate. You probably don't even know which one I'm talking about now, but Tennessee is in a great spot, and you say maybe go with either one of these tight ends. I think Gunnar Helm seems to maybe have won a job there. So.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is I agree. Like he's actually been better from a fantasy perspective, but him and Chig Okonkwo, wow, I usually am really good at saying his name. Chig Okonkwo have had similar target volume. Yeah. Like Okonkwo got about 7 targets last week, very similar to what Gunnar Helm did. So it's kind of like salary consideration for me at this point because Gunnar Helm is a full $1,000 cheaper than Okonkwo on DraftKings, and it's a little bit game theory. Like there's part of me that feels like if people play a Tennessee tight end, they're gonna want to play Helm, and I'm just a little bit inclined to say like I want to flip the script and get on Okonkwo and be a little bit different. It kind of probably depends on like the the contest I'm in. Like in a hundo contest where I only have to beat 99 people to take down the top, I'm probably playing Gunnar Helm because it's probably a little bit more certain. But if I'm in a large field contest, like it's intriguing to me to play a Conquo.
The fact that you think if people play a Tennessee Titan, they're going Gunnar Helm is just the wildest, like the NFL season coming full circle to me, because Gunnar Helm was beyond an afterthought. I wasn't sure Gunnar Helm was going to beat out Josh Wiley, who was kind of outplaying Tennessee Titan or Chicaconquo at points last season, but Wiley isn't even on the team anymore. And Gunnar Helm over these last few weeks has just really stepped up. It's funny to me. I'll be so interested to see his roster, because I'm being honest here. As I'm thinking about my GPP build, I'm going to need salary, and Gunnar Helm unlocks some things for me that other tight end on the slate is able to unlock. So I'm probably going that route. But if you want to go the complete opposite route, Austin, you could go the most expensive tight end on the slate. So.
Yeah, well, there is that option. The other option, because I'm thinking of ways to get off of Trey McBride in tournament contest in case he doesn't quite get there this week, because it isn't a great matchup for Arizona this week for tight ends at least. But George Kittle is intriguing to me. It's also not a good matchup really against the Cleveland Browns, who have been pretty solid on defense. But George Kittle's been getting volume, and especially with Brock Purdy back, he's continued to get volume. Last week he had 10 targets. He didn't really get there from a fantasy perspective, but if you think about tight ends who on any given week can score you 30 points and their name isn't Trey McBride, it's George Kittle. Right. And so to me, it's just, I want to find a way to get onto that. I thought about, do I want to play Brock Bowers this week? I don't mind it because Bowers, he can get there on volume, but I don't love it. I don't feel like I can convince myself like, he's going to beat the Chargers defense the way that I can convince myself that George Kittle will beat the Cleveland Browns defense.
I'm actually super nervous about Bowers, because the one thing the Chargers do is shut down tight ends. Derwin James is just a tight end stopper. There's not a lot of other players they have to shut down as the Chargers. What is super interesting about the Raiders, and I know this Bowers isn't even on the show sheet, but what's super interesting about the Raiders is the change at OC. You have Greg Olsen, who notoriously loves throwing to his tight end. Not that Greg Olsen, but still a tight end loving Greg Olsen. Moving into the OC spot from the QB coach spot. That should all mean great things for Bowers, but I think we're going to be looking at a letdown this week because of Derwin James and that Chargers defense. And they're coming off of bye. And they've been scheming for Brock Bowers for 2 weeks now. If anyone can stop Brock Bowers, it's the Chargers this week.
Yeah, no, that's a great call.
Let's move on to the defenses. Austin, I'm going to let you get us started. You have 2 picks, and then I'm going to go on a defense tangent because that's what I do sometimes.
I love it. Well, the first that I want to throw out there is the Pittsburgh Steelers defense, and it's a way to get leverage on Buffalo because I do think Josh Allen's going to be popular.
I was going to say, what a contrarian pick, because it just feels terrifying. But let's not pretend Josh Allen doesn't turn the ball over.
Yeah, we've seen some weird Josh Allen nonsense recently. Like he also had a tipped ball, nearly pick 6 interception here recently. So Pittsburgh Steelers, they're frisky. I like it as a way to build leverage against Buffalo. And then the Houston Texans defense is also really interesting to me this week. Again, I know that I'm kind of like talking out of both sides of my mouth, because on the one hand, I'm like, yeah, it'd be fun to play Cam Ward this week. On the other hand,
sometimes.
on the one hand, I'm like, yeah, you could play Jonathan Taylor. But on the other hand, I'm like, Houston Texans defense.
Yeah.
Daniel Jones seems like a good mix. Daniel Jones has been putting the ball in harm's way more and more frequently over the past month. This is another thing similar to Trevor Lawrence, similar to Josh Allen. We see weird things happen with these quarterbacks. Daniel Jones is in that category as well. And Houston Texans defense, they also weirdly have something to play for. Like they still can make the playoffs this year, which is wild to me. And they might have CJ Stroud back this week, and so be a little bit more inclined to play out for their team.
I couldn't agree more on the Texans. How I look at this is I look for sacks and turnovers, folks. You cannot predict touchdowns, but turnovers and sacks can get you there. Of the teams on this main slate, Austin, I think the Colts give up the most sacks over their last 3 games on the slate, and the most turnovers, or it may be second most sacks and the most turnovers. They're the only team averaging more than 2 turnovers a game. Thank you, Daniel Jones. And I believe it's over 4 sacks a game. So that's great for the Texans, because that's what the Colts are giving up. I mentioned last week that I get these bugs in my crawl about defenses. So I want to talk to you guys a little bit about what I found, because I mentioned last week I had a theory about just always playing the cheapest defense in cash, not in GPP. And I know this is the GPP section. I have some notes on that as well. So, Austin, where I landed on how I wanted to research this was I went and looked at what the cheapest defense did every single week 1 through week 12. And then I decided on the median defense. Comparing the cheapest defense, certainly in cash, to the high score makes zero sense. The whole point of cash is you want just a safe, easy option. So I went with the median, the exact middle in what they scored. Interestingly enough, every single week, the median defense is either 5 points or 7 points. Like there was 1 week where it was 6. It's either 5 or it's 7. That's just how it goes. So on the season, the median defense is averaging, interestingly, 5.7 points. Austin, the cheapest defense, if you played the exact cheapest defense every week, it's averaging 5.1 points. It's literally the same score. In 6 of those weeks, they have scored at or above the median, which means in 6 of those weeks, they have scored below the median. But in cash, Austin, that's exactly what you're looking for. I don't need to have the pop week. I need to have good enough. Until this week, the cheapest defense had never been the worst scoring defense on the slate. Interestingly enough, in week 7, it scored 0 points. In week 8, it scored -1 points. Still wasn't the worst defense on the slate. But then this past week, the week I decided to research it and play it, the Jets only scored 1 fantasy point. They were the worst defense on the slate. So that's how it happens. This week, it's the Carolina Panthers. They're going to come up in my lineup later. But Austin, it's very interesting to me, the cheap defense theory.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'll let you comment on that, and then I just want to talk a little bit about the Millie Maker defense.
No, I love the stats there. I mean, we talk about it. We've alluded to it every week. Like, you don't really need your defense to do that much to get there in cash, and you just laid out the case for exactly why.
Yep. What I love about it, this because I don't have to think. I put the cheapest defense in my lineup. If I have a little cash left over, if you have $100 left over this week, move up from Carolina to Tennessee. It's the easiest $100 move up on DraftKings in the world. I didn't have that left over, but you should. Millie Maker. Austin, this was eye-opening for someone who scratches this lottery ticket every week. I haven't done my deep research yet, and I'm not going to bring it up on the show again because we've already spent too much time on defense. But I went in and looked, Austin, at the average score. First of all, it's 16 points. That's a lot on defense, folks, that the average defense scores in the Millie Maker. Only twice this season, Austin, has that defense scored below 14 fantasy points in the Millie Maker. Half the weeks they were ranked first. The person who won $1 million guessed and got the best defense. That was the eye-opening part. And then another 3 weeks, it was the second ranked team. To win $1 million, Austin, you have to guess your defense right. You are going full upside. What I haven't looked at yet is in any of these weeks were they the highest price defense. I know for a fact in week 1, Denver was the highest price defense. So that one it does. But when I announce some of these teams to you, Austin, this is what we've seen this year. Millie making defense, the Carolina Panthers, the Tennessee Titans, the New York Jets, the Cleveland Browns. We're talking defenses that people, the New Orleans Saints, that people are actively avoiding. And how I know they're actively avoiding? In week 4, Austin, the New Orleans Saints were the cheapest defense on the slate. In week 5, they won somebody $1 million. In week 8, the Tennessee Titans were the cheapest defense in the slate. In week 9, they won someone $1 million. These are teams that were arguably the cheapest on the entire slate and won someone $1 million. You have to guess right on this defense. That's eye-opening to me. If you are not doing pure upside on your defensive play on the Millie Maker, you're doing something completely wrong.
No, I love it. I mean, yeah, the getting off the chalk defense in general in the tournaments feels like a huge thing, even if you're not getting the optimal one necessarily for smaller tournaments. But yeah, for that Millie Maker, you need to be able to get off of the chalk, definitely, from a defense perspective. I mean, and we talked about it with the Thanksgiving slate, like don't play the chalk defense, but it applies every week. Like if you're playing the chalk defense, there's a good chance they fail.
Yep. Yeah. Like I said, it was wild to me, the eye-opening of this. All right. We spent entirely too much time on defense. Let's get into the valedictorian shootout. Every week, Austin and I go head to head. No money, just bragging rights. The bragging rights are very much on one side of the fence right now. We do, as I mentioned, DraftKings touring. Austin, you took down your 4th in a row. I gave you 153 points because you picked Jackson Dart, but Jameis Winston was cheaper than Jackson Dart. So I gave you the pivot. Just normally we announce these lineups very early in the week. You can't really pivot. It just doesn't work that way. So you beat me, but you would have beat me by 2 points even if you took the 0 on Jackson Dart. You won 153 to 115. You are now 7-5 in the season after a 4-game winning streak. You're doing great things here. Jackson Smith and Jigba destroyed me last week in your lineup, but I also went Jameson Williams. So that's a 40-point swing at the wide receiver position. Makes it a little hard to come back from, even when your quarterback doubles me up. Everybody in my lineup, you've heard me mention on the show, except for one player. Or actually 2 players. I'm going Josh Allen at quarterback. I'm going Kyron Williams. I'm going Christian McCaffrey. I just think against the Browns, he's a really good play. Austin, I'm breaking a rule here, and I wanted to ask you, we'll do this at the end of my lineup. Is this the kind of weird slate where it's okay to break a rule? I'm going 2 running backs from the same game. So again, Kyron Williams, Christian McCaffrey, but I'm also going Quinshon Judkins. Michael Wilson, because I went expensive at running back, I'm going cheap at wide receiver. Michael Wilson, Shamiri DK, and John Mechie. Jawan Johnson is my tight end, and the cheapest defense on the slate is the Carolina Panthers. So before you announce your lineup, Austin, obviously this is cash. This is just for fun. When you get a weird slate like this, is it okay to get weird with your lineup, or should I have avoided 2 running backs in the same game?
No, I mean, I think it's fine for this context to have two running backs in the same game, although Kyron Williams and CMC are not in the same game.
No, Christian McCaffrey and Quinshon Judkins. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I said
you went 3
as I was saying it, I realized I'm an idiot. Christian McCaffrey versus Quinshon Judkins is the mistake I feel like I may have made.
I got you. My brain got a little tied up and not there.
No, it was how I said it. I knew it as I was saying it. So
yeah, I mean, I think Quinshon Judkins is a decent play this week, so I don't mind it. And the way Christian McCaffrey is utilized, like I think he's going to get there no matter what. So it's specific to the game. I think that is the type of game where it's fine. Now, if you had done it with Kyron Williams and the Carolina Panthers, that's where I'm like, no.
Correct. And I wouldn't have. And Austin, you said what I said, and I'm glad you said it, or what I thought. Christian McCaffrey is kind of that exception to most rules.
Yes.
You don't start 2 running backs in the same game unless it's Christian McCaffrey, because first of all, he's a receiver. So that's my lineup. This is the most jumbled lineup announcement ever. We'll tell you guys who won next week. Austin, go ahead and announce your lineup for everybody.
Yeah, so for me, it's going to be very similar to last week. I have Jacoby Brissett at quarterback. Mm-hmm. I'm going 2 running backs in Devin Neal and Travis Etienne. I'm just assuming that Kamara is going to be out. And so then I have 4 receivers, Greg Dortch, Chris Olave, Jacoby Myers, and Michael Pittman. Where I am going to smash you this week is I have Trey McBride at tight end. And then I was able to fit the Tennessee Titans defense into my lineup. Have $0 left off over, so it just worked out perfectly.
Yep, that was me too. I was thinking, like, do I downgrade Quinshon Judkins or someone? But I'm going to stick with Carolina, though I think Tennessee is the great play. And I forgot to do this last week. I apologize. And guess what? I didn't even go look up and see who won, and I left out last week. But we remind you can play with us for the final time this show. Links in the description of this video. And we do announce the winners when Ryan remembers. And Austin, I think this was a great week to remember to announce the winners, because I've never seen either of these names before. On DraftKings, congratulations to Laces Out Dan, who scored 217 points. I will remind you, folks, that 217 points has won the Millie Maker twice this season. And he scored it in the little Club Fantasy contest and would have barely cashed. That is his first win in any of our contests, his 10th entry. FanDuel elevated Nick, who I believe is early entry. I've never seen that name before. First win of the season. So congratulations to Laces Out Dan. Congratulations to elevated Nick. Make sure you guys join those contests in the links. Austin, that wraps up the show. We went a little long because I talked too much about defenses. Please remind everybody all the DFS work you do here at Club Fantasy.
Yeah, I love it. So first off, you can catch us here every Friday breaking down the main slate. And then on Thursdays, Josh Hudson and I break down the Thursday night showdown slates all throughout the year. We're getting close to playoff time too. Josh and I will also break down all of the playoff matchups. So make sure you stick with us throughout the entire NFL season. And as always, make sure you join that listener Discord. The link to join it's in the show description, and we will talk all about your DFS lineups, help you set them, celebrate your wins, mourn your losses together, even when you score 194 points in cash.
Thank you, folks, so much for tuning in. We appreciate each and every one of you. I hope you had a wonderful holiday. I will remind you, if you like what you heard today, hit that like button. If you want to hear it again next week, hit that subscribe button. If you happen to be listening on Apple or Spotify, hit that follow button. We appreciate everybody who tunes in. We do this show for you, folks. Follow Club Fantasy on all the socials at Club Fantasy FFL. Austin and I are listed down below if you want to follow either one of us. Good luck on your slate building. We'll see you next week.